As African nations hope for sustainable development and economic growth increase, a new form of neo-colonization has emerged through exploitation of African countries' resources. And in order for us to understand this topic, we have Mr. Omondi Okuwane. He is a political scientist and a researcher. He is a resident at the Institute of Public Policy and International Affairs. He is a senior fellow at RAD Peace Research Institute. His works are based on security studies, and his main focus is on the Horn of Africa. His recent works were based on counterterrorism, extremism, radicalization, and de-radicalization in communities in the Horn of Africa. But before we turn the platform over to our guests, I want you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel so that whenever I post a new video, you will be amongst the first people to be notified. Mr. Omondi, you are welcome to the Unpopular Opinion.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the show. Thank you very much for welcoming me. It's a pleasure to talk to you and to talk to the audience in this show. The topic we are going to discuss today, it's a very hot topic and it's a recent topic because there's a lot of developments when it comes to climate change, when it comes to, climate change issues, loss and damage in Africa. And there are new green transitions coming to Africa. So it's really a hot topic today to discuss some of these topics. And what I'm going to discuss today is based on a case study we have been doing for the past 7 years. We have been conducting research in Kenya. That's the northern part of Kenya, which is very arid and semi-arid. It is a pastoral region where most of the population living there are pastoralists. They depend on traditional grazing for their livelihood. So,
and it's animal rearing.
Right, animal rearing or pastoral, nomadic pastoralism. So this area has attracted new carbon offset scheme or carbon offset projects where the Northern Rangeland Trust, it's a private entity, has been conducting different conservation projects within this region. So you find that there are various community-based conservancies, or rather community-based projects. These community-based projects have went from traditional grazing patterns to a more modern grazing patterns with the help of this Northern Rangeland Trust. It's an NGO, or rather a private entity, which is helping the pastoral community to come up with different modern grazing patterns. And these grazing patterns, it is, they use these modern grazing patterns as a natural resource management. They are trying to save the flora and fauna, or rather they're trying to save the ecosystem, save the wildlife, and also save the forests through modern grazing. And this type of grazing is indeed affecting the pastoral communities who are used to their traditional grazing system. So it's the NGO is trying to push the pastoral communities to get away from the traditional grazing system to a more modern way of grazing. And this modern way of grazing, is helping to save the wildlife. And as a consequence, this project it's helping to restore carbon back to the soil. When the forest is conserved, then it's a way, it helps to conserve the carbon, or rather to take the carbon back to the soil and eliminate or eliminate the emission, the carbon emissions in the atmosphere.
But I think that's a good thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is indeed. It's a very good thing. It's a very good way of. It's a very good project when it comes to offsetting carbon, and it's a very good. It's a very good green transition, because the project is going to benefit the communities. It's going to benefit these pastoral communities in various ways, because this money, I think you are aware that this carbon sequestration did not start yesterday, but it has a history from the Kyoto Protocol, which came up with carbon trading, or rather carbon credit, where and then the Marrakesh, which is COP7, Conference of Party number 7 on climate change, came up with the voluntary mechanism of emissions, and therefore it is indeed a very good way of green transition in Africa. But the contention comes in when it comes to the management of these projects. The questions come: who are managing these projects, and how are these projects being managed?
Okay.
And
Before we go to those questions, I want to ask you some. What does this project has to do with neo-colonialization in Africa, or neo-colonialism? I want to dive into that other aspect.
Right. Actually, that is where I was getting into. When you look at the management of this project, the reason why actually this talk is based on a paper we wrote, which is going to be published by World Development Journal, and neo-colonialism come in various ways. Number one, you find that this project is run by the Northern Rangeland Trust. Now, if you look at the people who started Northern Rangeland Trust, they have a background from the British colonial individuals. Northern Rangeland Trust in Kenya was started by Ian Craig, and now Ian Craig was a son of a colonialist in Kenya. And then you find that today Northern Rangeland Trust is run by the locals, but these locals who run the Northern Rangeland Trust are local elites, and they are working with various local leaders, local politicians, in terms of management of this conservancy. So they get credibility from the political class. Therefore, you find that the management of this project, such as the carbon offset project, it reflects what we explain as institutional broccolage. By institutional broccolage, we mean that, if you look at these institutions or the management of this project, it is about the favor for the political class, or the favor for these elites and people within this organization. They manipulate the community, and the community, which is supposed to benefit from this project, are not benefiting from this project. And then you find these communities are given cash handouts. And we followed some of these cash handouts. You find that these cash handouts are given in strategic ways. Sometimes these cash handouts are given when the community management is conducting elections, for various leaders of the community conservancies. So then it's a way of, influencing the communities to vote in a certain way. And you find that, for example, the individual I mentioned, such as Ian Craig, of course, Ian Craig he started this Northern Rangeland Trust, and now the trust is a private entity. Of course, there are the leadership of the Northern Rangeland Trust has some of the Kenyan elites within the trust, but you find that the beneficiaries of various projects which comes into this organization are it's benefiting these elites, and they are working with various political elites in Kenya, and the communities are just subjects when it comes to such projects. And when we talk of institutional bricolage, I think bricolage is a French word which comes from, construction, constructing something out of nothing. And we define these policymakers, or we define the managers of these community conservancies as bricoleurs. These bricoleurs come up with various initiatives or formal and informal rules which benefits them or which favors them. So, and they take advantage of the laws which exist or the gaps of laws and policies which are there to project their favors. And therefore, you find that communities are not really benefiting from this carbon credit project, but rather the managers, the elders who are part of the council of the NRT, of the organization, and the managers are the ones benefiting from this project. But then the communities are not benefiting much from these projects.
Okay. I want to ask you a question. Critics can argue that carbon offset projects can lead to neocolonization and environmental injustice. So how does this manifest in the context of Northern Kenya region?
Thank you. That's a very valid question. If you look at this project is meant to benefit the communities, the pastoral communities in these areas. But you find that it's a neo-colonial aspect which is ruling, or rather which is controlling this project, in the sense that the money that comes from carbon credit offset come from various global institutions, and this money they come to northern Kenya, rather the Northern Rangeland Trust.
I want to understand some international community is providing funding for this project, but the project is not being translated to the locals.
Right. You find that if you look at the mechanism of this carbon offset, or rather the voluntary mechanism of carbon offset, it's based on polluter pay. So you find that institutions within the North, or rather companies and organizations within the global North, they have a voluntary mechanism where they pay for, because they are polluting the environment. So there's a voluntary mechanism where they pay for projects, green projects in the global South. And therefore, this Northern Kenya Rangeland Carbon Project is one of those projects where the global North are paying for the mechanism through modern grazing or conservation, conserving the ecosystem, which at the long run will help in carbon sequestration. So therefore, the global North are paying for these projects. There's also another compliance project, which is not voluntary as the one we are talking about. Carbon sequestration, which is compliance, comes from the government, where government come up with laws, and therefore different organizations, maybe working within a certain jurisdiction of government, will pay for their emissions.
Okay, yeah.
But we are not talking about that. What we are talking about now is a voluntary mechanism where companies from the US, companies from maybe Portugal, companies from the UK would find it fit. They look at different green mechanism projects or in the global south or elsewhere, and they support this project. One of those projects is the one we are talking about, where the Northern Kenya rangeland carbon project has won has attracted various resources through proposals, and they are receiving money to manage these community conservancies. And the management of these community conservancies leads to carbon sequestration, whereby the carbon is stored back to the soil through the management of forests, through the management of and also the wildlife is flourishing in these areas, but which is a good thing. But on the long run, this carbon sequestration project is meant to help the communities within these projects. But you find that these communities who are supposed to benefit from this project are not benefiting, but the elite, or rather the powerful people within the communities, they're the ones benefiting from this project. You find them driving big cars, they're living big, or rather, and the communities within this project are not benefiting. And also, if you look at the Kenyan laws, for example, the Kenya Forest Act, you look at the National Wildlife Act, the Community Land Act, this, or rather the Climate Change Act in Kenya, these are statutory laws which stipulate community involvement, or rather community participation. Participation of the community is politicized. So you find that when it comes to community participation, or rather community oversight, it is done in a way that fits various people. And if you do research, we've done research in these communities, you find that communities are very skeptic, or rather, they don't understand what is this project. They don't even know what is carbon offset. They don't know what is carbon credit. But these projects are pushed in their throat. And in 2022, in COP27, this project earned a lot of attention, international attention, that it's one of the largest carbon offset projects, in rangelands in Kenya. But the communities within this project are not benefiting. So it's leading to environmental poverty, because now their traditional grazing system is going to be affected by these community-based conservancies, because their land is going to shrink, because some of these projects, community-based conservancies, they're practicing modern grazing, where you don't just graze anywhere. So land is becoming smaller. And again, as far as this community conservancies is
but Clifford, I think I think that should be a good thing, because when we consider Kenya, some few years ago, we understood that there was drought in Kenya. So in terms of putting all of this mechanism in place, I think it's in the good interest of Kenya. So what is the contradiction there? Can you please highlight on that contradiction?
Yes, you're right, because carbon sequestration, or rather modern grazing in northern Kenya, will help conserve the environment. That's number one. It will help to flourish the flora and fauna. So the wildlife is going to flourish, the forests are going to flourish and so on. But you find that these pastoral communities, they have a traditional mechanism of conserving their environment. So over the years, these communities have been living with the wildlife, they have been living with these forests, and they have been having, their land has been communal. Communal in the sense that the land is owned by the community. So they graze in some part at a certain time, and then when it rains in another part, so there's an exchange of that. But the project which is coming now, which is brought by Northern Rangeland Trust on carbon sequestration, it's coming up with modern grazing. Modern grazing meaning that this community will not be grazing the way they used to graze. So they will be forced to reduce some of their cattle. They will be forced to not graze anywhere they want to graze. So then they are dependent on nomadic pastoralism. But here is a case they will be told to reduce their cattle, their animal.
Okay, so before you go further, I'd like to ask you, who do you think is responsible for this contradiction in the lives of the people?
The people who are responsible, it's a chain of actors. Number one, we have this institution, which I just told you was formed by Ian Craig, who is a son of a British colonialist. Northern Rangeland Trust was started by Ian Craig. So it's an actor. And since 1995, Northern Rangeland Trust has been managing or helping these communities to manage their conservancies, these community conservancies. And the aim has been the institution is helping them to manage their conservancies and then letting them, teaching them, or rather helping them to manage their conservancies and letting them manage their conservancy after some time. But since 1995, these community conservancies have always been helped to manage their conservancies by the NRT, Northern Rangeland Trust. And there was a bitter divorce between a conservancy called Namunyak in Samburu, a place called Samburu in northern Kenya. They divorced from NRT because they thought that NRT was not letting them manage their own conservancy. And then there was a lot of issues were cited, such as corruption and so on. So you find that these community conservancies are not able to manage themselves, but they are being manipulated, they are being managed by the NRT, who is getting these projects money and then trying to manipulate these communities at the local level. So then the communities are not able to manage themselves, but they are being managed from the top. So then the beneficiaries are the people, the NRT, which is on the top, and also the political class, which is working with the NRT.
I think it's clear now.
Yes. So yes. So I mean, that is what we are trying to investigate. So we have, as I said earlier, we have done quite vast research, qualitative research, staying with these communities in a place called Isiolo. That is community conservancies in Isiolo, community conservancies in Samburu. The community conservancies, or rather the communities in Isiolo County, Isiolo is a place, Isiolo is a is a county in northern Kenya. So the communities in these areas were very skeptic about this organization called Northern Rangeland Trust. But over the years, the Northern Rangeland Trust has won the trust of the community elders. So they work with elders, they give incentive to these elders to convince their communities that this project, or rather community conservancies, are better for them. So after some time, you find that communities tell us that, okay, our elders have told us that Northern Rangeland Trust is not that bad, like this. But then you ask them if they know about this project. They happen to not to know this project, but of course they are receiving cash transfers. They are receiving some lump sum money. But you find that these projects, or rather these cash transfers, are not benefiting them as it should, because these cash transfers are given at various strategic times. For example, whenever there is an election of a community conservancy, that's when you see some cash transfers to manipulate the election of leaders of these community conservancies and so on.
Okay, so because I think we are coming to the conclusion now, I want to ask you, who do you think is responsible for this unaccountability?
This unaccountability, what I explained earlier about institutional brutality. If you look at the structure of the community, there's a debate called the agent structure within the communities. You find that every community has some sort of leadership, and elites in these communities, I would say, are responsible, because these elites are the ones who are responsible for the development of the community. But then you find that private entities such as NRT and so on, they come to these communities, they manipulate the elders, then the elders buy their ideas, and therefore and then the communities are just subject. They are not beneficiaries. But if you go to various international conferences, you find that NRT, or rather different private entities, are saying communities are benefiting from this project, but they are just subject. The responsible people are these private entities who are manipulating the elders and so on.
Okay. I think this brings us to the end of today's discussion. Thank you so much, Mr. Monday, and we look forward to having many discussions with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and it was a pleasure to come to your show, and it was a pleasure for the audience to listen to me as well. Thank you.